January camp comes to a climax tonight. The NWSL has a $1 million player, and I am doubling my prayers that there's absolutely no parallels between the Detroit Lions and the Liverpool season. That and more on Wednesday's Morning Kickaround. Hello and welcome to the show. This is Morning Kickaround, covering the world's favorite game from the world's most favoritist country, coming to you live each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm Robert Kerr, up from the lower leagues, happy to be joined by my favorite soccer pen pal, SiriusXM FC's afternoon host, and your breakfast buddy, Mr. Jason Davis. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm most tariff having country. Is that a thing? Do we want to comment? No, we don't. We don't want to comment.
It's the most terrific country.
Well done, sir. Well done. And you did that joke despite your mourning over the end of the Detroit Lions season. I give you credit for that, Rob. Thank you.
It's really horrible when you know in your heart of hearts that the team that you've been rooting for your whole life is actually better than 99% of the teams out there. And then when it comes down to a one-game elimination, they save their worst ball for that time and don't play within themselves. And they make all the mistakes that people were saying, oh, they're going to play too many trick plays and it's going to bite them in the butt. And then they save their absolute worst trick play for the worst possible time. And I really hope that, like I said at the top, I really am praying for no parallels between the Lions and Liverpool, because it's all roses and great performances and leading the top of the league all through the regular season. I'm just grateful that the Premier League does not have single game eliminations at the end. So that's I'm crossing my fingers, but I'm definitely have a little bit of a sinking feeling in my gut right now.
Okay, well, I don't think, just because you like both those teams doesn't mean that they are somehow cosmically tied, and the Liverpool season is going to follow the path of the Detroit Lions season, especially considering that the years and years and years of failing to win a title for the Lions goes much deeper than Liverpool. Liverpool at least has a Premier League title in recent memory and Champions League titles in living memory. The Lions don't got much of anything. So.
Yeah, but they've been this year. They've been inexplicably tied to each other, because many of my Sundays this fall have been enjoying a Liverpool win, being in first place in the morning, and then enjoying a Lions game in the afternoon of them being in first place and playing really well. So the two are very much tied.
I see.
And I really hope that the like I said, the parallels end there, because it's a really sour taste to end what it was a very sweet season.
Yeah, I know we got a lot to get to today. We got some headlines, we got transfer news, record-breaking transfer happening in women's football.
Guest.
We've got Jeff Rueter is coming up on the show. We're going to talk about the demise of Extra Time Radio and what that means for MLS and their media strategy, I guess is the way to think about it. But I will say that I think there's probably a lot of people listening to this show, watching this show, who are thinking, yeah, it's like that for me too. Like, I have two teams. There's no real connection other than I support both of them, and somehow I feel like they're tied together and they're intertwined. It's like one of those things I don't really understand about quantum physics, where there's like entanglement and like particles in one part of the universe can be somehow tied to a particle on another side of the universe. It feels like that, Rob, right? It feels like that.
It's all connected. It's all connected somewhere out there. And before we get to our long balls and headlines for the day, be sure to help us become the town square of the American soccer conversation by telling all your folks, all your people, and even yourself if you haven't clicked the button. Like and subscribe the Morning Kickaround YouTube channel, Morning Kickaround. That's 2 words. And click subscribe. We crushed and blazed past the 500 subscriber goal, and we are now on the march to 1,000. Let's make it in half as much time. It took us about, 2 months to get to 500. Let's get to 1,000 in 1 month. Follow along on social media at mkickaround on all the platforms on your screen, or write us a nice little note, morningkickaround@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's roll into Wednesday's long balls here on Morning. All right, we are going to kick off long balls for Wednesday, January 22nd. There was no show on Monday due to the holiday, but we must, or we oblige, or we should talk about United States men's national team defeating Venezuela on Saturday, and then tonight, the climax, the explosion, the explosive ending to Camp Cupcake 2025 tonight versus Costa Rica. I'll lead off. I really enjoyed the goals on Saturday, but I'm not really sure what to make of the rest of it, to be honest.
Well, I mean, it's one of the things going into it. Right? I think we talked about it on Friday. I think a lot of people had the same opinion, which is, am I excited for this? Not really. Like it's not like I don't care at all. It's not like my interest level is a 0. But it is not necessarily high. It's January camp. You don't have to call it Camp Cupcake if you think that's too dismissive of these players.
It is
disrespectful. You don't have to.
It is.
But it certainly, from our historical perspective, has never really been a big deal. Now, of course, you can go back in history and you can look and you can say, well, we have seen a player or two come out of this camp in the past, which means there's always a chance that somebody's going to make a case for themselves in this game, in these couple of games in this case, and we could see them for the national team in the near future. I will also point out, and this has been said to me by my radio partner, Eric Winalda, many, many times, right? A guy who played for the national team during his playing career. He said, for some of these guys, it's not even really about, can I make a World Cup or will I be a U.S. international? It's, I now have a cap, and a cap means something for my club future, right? Now, we know about the work permit rules in England, and they're tough. And you have to have a certain number of games played, and it depends on the ranking of your country and a lot of those other things. But for some places, not England, just having one cap can be your entry to being able to play in a given country. So, and some of these guys, it's not going to be England. It's not going to be the Premier League, rather, or it's not going to be the Bundesliga or Serie A, but it could be Belgium. It could be Austria. It could be the Netherlands. I mean, they have international limits there too, but this could be a thing that leads to these opportunities abroad. So that is something to consider as well. And we don't have to. Like, we can do this. Americans, U.S. men's national team fans, I'm talking to you. We can do this. We can watch a game and enjoy a victory without applying any extra meaning to what happens on the field. We can just enjoy the fact that our team won a soccer match and did it with fun goals, right? Anyabang was great in this game. Is he going to be a future star for the national team? I have no idea. But I'm glad he had his moment. I'm glad he got. I mean, Milovic was a freaking roller coaster. What a ride that was with Michael Milovic.
I gotta say the earning the penalty in like the opening moments and then stealing the ball from the original kick taker. I was kind of blown away. I imagine Pochettino probably pre-selected the penalty taker. And it doesn't seem like him.
But that's the thing. Pochettino even said after the game, we didn't have a penalty taker before the game. He said, we didn't say anything about who would be the penalty taker in case we had one, but it was good because the argument, meaning what you just talked about with Milovic taking the ball, it showed the character. Matko took the ball first, and then Jack wanted to shoot. I think it was a nice situation. We clarified it at halftime. They apologized. Matko apologized. And Jack apologized because there was a situation. Look, in a different context, if this was the A team and you're playing a meaningful match, that would not be a good sign, right? That would be an indicator of something wrong with Pochettino or with the players or the leadership. Remember what happened at Chelsea last year when Pochettino was in charge at Chelsea? I mean, it became this huge thing. And Pochettino doesn't want that again with the national team that he's managing at the moment. But because it's a bunch of MLS-based players, because nobody thinks of these guys as frontline players going into the World Cup period, it can just be like, oh, they figured it out. Good for them. Like, even though Milovic missed or was saved, good for them. They figured it out.
It's wild when players fight to take the penalty and then take like the lamest penalty you can imagine, because that was like a very easily saved penalty on that.
I'm going to say this too. Yesterday in the Champions League, Dortmund ends up losing to Bologna, and Nuri Sahin got fired for it, which maybe we'll address.
We'll get to that,
level.
yeah.
But Gio Reyna was ready to step up and take that penalty. Like, he wanted to take the penalty, but of course, Guirassy is the leading goal scorer for Dortmund, and he was on the field, and of course he would be the natural choice. And he took, I'm going to say it, a bad penalty. He tried to Panenka, almost had it saved. What a bunch of, what a bit of shame that would have been for Guirassy if he had had a Panenka saved. So yeah, when you take the ball from somebody who really wants it, and I guess in this situation, they didn't have a dedicated penalty taker for the United States. If you take it, you better hit a good penalty. You better hit it hard. You better find a corner. Be more Landon Donovan, Christian Pulisic than be what Matko Milovic did in that game.
Looking ahead to tonight, is there anyone that you want to see play tonight versus Costa Rica that we didn't really see on Saturday to get that last chance to get that starting cap?
We got 25 minutes of Diego Luna. More Diego, más Luna, por favor, as my kid would say. Like, we want more Diego Luna, right? We want to see what he can do with a true central kind of opportunity. It was Milovic to start against Venezuela. Maybe it will be Diego Luna against Costa Rica. I think, lots of people like Emeka Eneli of RSL. Is he a player that deserves a little bit more opportunity? He is 25. I mean, there are some players here that because we're seeing for the first time, and if you're not a hardcore MLS fan, you might not you might not realize how old they are. Jack McGlynn's still young. He's 21. Hell of a left foot on that kid. Wow, what a
beautiful
hammer.
goal. That was worth the ticket to anyone that went to that game.
Yeah, that made the whole experience worth it. Like, we played in Fort Lauderdale on Inter Miami's weird pitch in that place, and we played Venezuela.
But you saw a rocket shot.
But we saw an absolute cannon from Jack McGlynn. Makes it worth it. Yeah, I think more Diego Luna would be nice. Outside of that, it's really hard to say. Some of these guys you do know a little bit. Do I need more DeJuan Jones? Do I need more Walker Zimmerman? No, I don't. I mean, Miles Robinson had a fine game against Venezuela. Does that mean anything? I'm not so sure. I don't know. Aguiman again. Let's just see Aguiman again. Lead the line, maybe get a goal or two, and maybe this is a player, he's 24, he's come from third division college soccer to get to this level. That's a great story. Maybe he's setting himself up for a move abroad, and he gets to play with Wilfried Zaha in Charlotte this year, so that's going to be wild.
Yeah, I know you said that can't we just enjoy this game without reading too far into it, but you missed my question in the notes. Is Agyemang a Novakovic or an Altidore?
No. Are we doing that, really?
We don't have to.
He's just a nice player for the moment, right? And if he scores 15 goals in MLS this season, then we can have a conversation in January of 2026 about whether he has a European move in his future. I don't think, unless he goes somewhere this coming summer, unless he makes a move to a higher level league and scores goals in Europe, I don't think he's a World Cup player. So, and we're all focused on the World Cup. That's the next thing for the U.S. men's national team. That's Mauricio Pochettino's white whale, is do something at the World Cup. I don't even think he cares what happens to the U.S. men's national team afterwards, because he's not supposed to be on the job then. So Aguiman is a player for after that, if he is going to be a player for the U.S. at all. And so I'm not going to get too in the weeds on this.
Long ball number 2 here for Wednesday. It was we're in the middle of a busy midweek. A lot of players playing overseas in Champions League and otherwise. Probably the biggest story from yesterday is Borussia Dortmund fire Sahin. Is this a good or a bad thing for Gio?
I think you have to look at it as a good thing, right? I think because he is a player that wasn't getting significant starts. He did get a couple of starts. I mean, I think towards the end, Sahin was just throwing stuff up against the wall, right? He was just like, what are we doing here? We got no plan. He had some injuries. I mean, Gio played more when Julian Brandt was out, and as soon as Julian Brandt came back, it was less time for Gio. Dortmund is a mess. And I saw plenty of observers, people who pay more attention to the Bundesliga and Dortmund, say, if the board could fire themselves, they should fire themselves, right? Because it's not Sahin that's the problem. It's sort of institutional at Dortmund. They set this up for Nuri Sahin to take over for Terzic last year. They set Terzic up, right? A guy who they didn't love because of the style of football that he wanted to play or that he was playing. They made a Champions League final, and this is where they are. And they had handpicked former player Nuri Sahin to take over. They brought him in without Terzic say so as an assistant last year. I mean, that's always tough. Like when your replacement is hired and you don't even really, like what's happening here. So I and I'm not saying that Edin Terzic was great. I mean, he had his moments, but again, he got them to a Champions League final, and here they are wallowing in a pretty bad spot. And they do not have a birthright to being a German power. If they don't figure this out pretty quickly, it could get ugly. I think that this is more than is it good for Gio and his playing time. This might be the thing that gets us to the point of Gio, get out however you can. Get out. There have been loans discussed this winter. If there is a transfer on the table, I hope Dortmund is open to taking something like, I don't know, can you get 30 million for Gio? 25, something like that. They may think he should have had more value. He doesn't right now because they've mishandled his development. His injuries have slowed him at some level. He has the stain of the World Cup on his record. He just needs to get out and have a fresh start, and Dortmund needs one.
In other Champions League action, the American duo for Juve, they got some time on the field in the 0-0 draw. Weah played for 66 minutes. Weston got about 20 minutes or so. I'm not sure. I wanted to ask where Weston played when he came in, because I had a laugh over the weekend. He came in and played fullback, but on the other side than he did the week before. So I was just adding up. They're just checking the boxes of which positions Weston McKennie can play, and they're gonna find that one. They've almost got them all. They haven't put him in goal yet, like we heard suggested last week. But right-sided fullback, he can accomplish now. But they are moving him around and trying to find a place where he doesn't succeed. But he's still Weston, able to succeed no matter where they put him on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I'm going to have any frustration, it is the mild frustration that there is not an established position for Weston McKennie. But I'm not sure that it necessarily matters all that much. We've in the past had discussions about players, quote unquote, out of position with their clubs and how that would impact their ability to perform for the U.S. men's national team, but I'm not sure I worry about that too much with Weston McKennie. He is just a really, really, really good footballer. Right? Will we ever have reason to call him world-class or do that whole debate? I don't know. Probably not. And as long as he's bouncing around the formation for Thiago Motta, probably he won't get that kind of love. But it says something incredible about him that no matter where Motta puts him, he performs well. And he's in that kind of form at the moment in his career. He was playing the 10 in the league on the weekend, right? And again, he's a fullback. He's an 8. He, dropping in at center back, I guess, occasionally. Obviously, he can go up top and he can do things because of his ability to win the ball in the air and things like that. I mean, I will maintain this. Like, he's a very good footballer, but first and foremost, Weston McKennie is, if he's not a world-class soccer player, he is a world-class athlete, right? Just athletically, Weston McKennie is elite, and that allows him to adapt. Now, you have to have an understanding of your position and spacing and all that stuff, and obviously touch is different than sort of pure athletic ability. But the guys, I said this before, if Weston McKennie, Texas-born Weston McKennie, son of a serviceman, spent time in Germany, it's why he became a soccer player, basically. If he had decided to be a football player, an American football player, he would have been all-state in Texas. He would have gotten a full ride to play quarterback at some massive football school because that's the kind of athlete he is.
Elsewhere, AC Milan play Girona today. Pulisic still doubtful from his injury. Yunus Musa reportedly still healthy, so some games still to take in this afternoon if you want to catch some Americans. Have you seen anything regarding Pulisic and when he might return?
I do not expect him to play today. I think that is it's still a little bit early. They are trying to be careful with him. I think it's pretty clear he had a recurrence of the same injury that kept him out a little bit in December. And he came back and he was fine, but he got kicked. right? He got kicked again, and clearly that wasn't ideal. Helped win the Supercopa in Saudi Arabia, gets kicked. You don't want to lose him for a couple of months. In fact, I think that's the thinking at Milan. They don't want to lose him for a couple of months. They obviously have the Champions League is a thing for them, and I do think this is an interesting moment for Milan because they don't have much hope of doing anything remarkable in the league. But there is still this pressure to finish top 4 to be sure of your Champions League spot next year, right? But as long as your Champions League campaign is still alive this season, well, the temptation would be lean into that, right? And they've won 4 in a row, and now they're on 12 points, and they're 15th in the table in the Champions League with 2 games left. So they can max out at 18 points, which could have them in the top 8 if some things break their way. I think that's unlikely. Obviously, Girona today, look, they should be able to beat Girona. They should be able to, even without Christian Pulisic, they should be able to beat Girona. And, I don't know. And then they have Dinamo Zagreb on the final day of the Champions League next week in Zagreb. Should be mentioned, it's in Zagreb. So that's another one where you maybe think if you are Conceição, who is trying to figure it out in the league, I think that's his real task. You may be able to just not play your big guns in at least one of those games. It could be this week against Girona at home, or it could be next week against Zagreb, or it could be both, right? And obviously the league is the league matches. They got Parma coming up on Sunday. Like Parma, you have to beat Parma if you're Milan and you want to be top 4. You got to beat Parma at home at the San Siro. They have Inter the Sunday after the final Champions League match day. So there are massive games in the league that Conceição has to deal with. You don't want to risk Christian Pulisic. Now, Musa may still get more opportunities because of this, which I'm excited for.
Yeah, it's wild to think that Milan, they're pretty good after winning those 4 games in a row after losing their first 2. And another notable match, non-American related though, Man City sitting on the edge of not making it through this first stage of this new Champions League format. They'll make it, but they are hanging on to the last place in the promotion or the continuing round with 8 points, with the aforementioned Zagreb tied with them. So still a lot to play for here in this league stage of the Champions League.
This is what we're so obviously we are ahead of the second half of match day 7 with games today. Manchester City PSG is the headlining game. That game in Paris, actually, PSG Man City. Winner of that, it's a must-win game for both teams because of their place. Because Manchester City's in 24th, which is the last spot to go into the playoff round to try to get to the round of 16, and PSG is in 26th. They're on the outside. Right? It would be a disaster if PSG doesn't make some knockout phase of a Champions League. And this first year of this league format has been wild. And I'm balancing these things in my head, Rob, because as a conscientious soccer fan, I understand that there are too many games and players are being pushed to the brink. And this is all a money grab. Money, 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 right? This is about UEFA trying to undercut the idea of the Super League by changing the format of the first stage of the Champions League, but adding 2 games. It's the same idea the NFL has. Add games. It's the same idea FIFA has. Add games. Everybody's idea is just to add games. I don't like that part. But the non-conscientious, just flat out, entertainment-seeking soccer fan is loving this because it will come down to Soccer Palooza a week from today, January 29th, 18 games kicking off simultaneously with very little will be decided when we get there. Right, the table is close enough. Liverpool is through to the round of 16.
Yeah, look at that. They got the 1 seed.
They're the only ones guaranteed a bye to the round of 16 by being top 8. You're the only one in the table. It could change today, but this is just fascinating that we are going to sort of get all of this drama. It's going to feel, like an NCAA tournament day when we get there next week.
Yeah, that'll be wild. We'll see what happens. Long ball 3 here for Wednesday. Naomi Girma, the United States women's national team center back, set to join Chelsea. We talked about it last week, but the destination has now become clear. The number closer to confirmation, $1.1 million for Naomi Girma. perhaps playing at Chelsea, she'll have a chance at the Ballon d'Or. What do you make of all this now that we kind of have, we're getting closer? I think we'll talk to Jeff Rueter about this. He did a piece on her in The Athletic, but this is doubling the transfer record in the women's game before. Emma Hayes says she's the best center back she's ever seen. So, quite a moment for women's soccer, Naomi Girma, and NWSL, really.
Yeah, I saw. I don't have the Blue Sky post in front of me. I wish I did, because I'd like to be able to quote it directly and give credit where it's due. But I saw something with this news that said we've doubled the women's transfer record in a year. Right, we went from a Bay FC spending 500 or whatever, that's 750, or before that, within a year we've gone from 500,000 to $1 million.
Yep.
At this pace, the record that was set in the men's game, which I think is Neymar, like 232 million, the women's game will get there by 2032 or something. You do the math. Now, obviously, like it won't always be. This isn't like computer chips, whatever that law was that said computer chips will double in processing speed every so. I mean, I don't think it's quite like that. But it is remarkable. Now, there are two ways to look at this, Rob. Right? There are a couple of different angles on this story that I think are worth discussing for us. And Nate's bringing up one of them. And maybe we focus on the negative and then go to the positive. Quite a bad moment for the NWSL. Now, what Nate's saying is, of course, you can't hold on to your best American talent because the money's not there. Now, Naomi Girma wanted out of San Diego. Lots of people are wanting out of San Diego. We don't want to have time to dive into what's going on in San Diego.
Yeah, I was going to say, you piqued my curiosity. What's going on?
Oh, you need to go look into that yourself.
Okay,
you need to go. That is independent research. We don't have time to talk about Jill Ellis and lawsuits and sexual harassment. And cultural problems and Casey Stoney. We don't have time to do any of that.
Okay,
but we will say that just as a part of this story about Naomi Girma, she wanted out of San Diego. Now, if she wants out of San Diego, and the NWSL does not have a cash market, which MLS just instituted, and NWSL does not have that yet, then you would have to trade for Naomi Girma within NWSL. And I'm going to guess that there aren't many teams willing to trade their assets, the tradable assets that they have within the structure of NWSL, which is very similar to what MLS has, right? With allocation money and roster spots and players. Like, what can you trade? There was probably nobody who had a package that was going to entice San Diego, like $1.1 million was going to entice San Diego. Right, Rob? Mm-hmm. So is this a problem for the NWSL, or is it just progress in women's football that we need to make peace with? Right? Like, so I don't think the NWSL is suddenly not a top league in women's football because Naomi Girma goes to Chelsea for $1.1 million. Chelsea is tied. Obviously, the women's team is very successful, but the Chelsea is tied to the men's team. And as a unit, as an organization, they got a little bit more cash than any of these NWSL teams have lying around, right?
And they're willing to. The ownership of Chelsea aren't making comments like the Manchester United leadership is making comments about their women's side. But I don't think it has to be a good or a bad thing. It kind of shows where the women's game is almost on a more of a level playing field at their advancement than the men's game. It isn't like the European game is this monolith, and the MLS is trying to sneak in there. The tide is rising equally on both sides. So I think there will be were people decrying the transfer inbound of that Spanish defender who got the $500,000 dollar transfer last year? I mean, I think it might be a healthy competition of teams competing with each other for the top talent.
Yeah, I think that if you were just if you want to be overly negative about what this means for NWSL, you can certainly find a way to think of this as a problem for NWSL, which, look, as a growing league, in a growing sport, in a world in which women's football is finally getting some respect, NWSL has lots of challenges. right? And again, I think if you are in the weeds and you're a very close watcher of NWSL, you can find lots of reasons not to like what's happening from a leadership level with Jessica Berman, despite her being recognized for awards and such, or San Diego as an example, or maybe you think the way that Denver won the expansion race doesn't feel on the up and up, or that the money there it seems like a bubble. Though you can find reasons to question those things. But I also think that in the general marketplace of women's football, this was always bound to happen. And it's a good thing. What I like about this, here's a reason to be positive. It's an American who generated this fee, right? And a defender,
Right.
a defender at that, right? And I hope we get to talk to Jeff Rueter about this. She is a defender who is setting this record, who it gets the first transfer fee over $1 million. Now, it's only $850,000 in pounds, which is kind of annoying. Like, I'd like to make it £1 million and make it a nice round number in England, in the Women's Super League. But this is still great for Naomi Girma to be recognized at this level. And you said something which I hate is true. Okay, I hate that this is true. And it was always bound to happen that culturally, because the footballing nations are concentrated in Europe, that the way the game is perceived was going to kind of flow out of Europe, even though America was first with our national team being great, and even though we've established a league and all these things, and clubs are growing and the sport is catching on here or gaining ground. Naomi Girma, to get the proper recognition, the recognition she deserves, has to be in Europe. That's sad, but it's true. It's true. If she wins a Ballon d'Or, it's going to happen while she's in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, you're right there in the microscope in London, from California to London. I'm kind of curious as to how that transition goes. Much different spots. Definitely not the sunny beaches of San Diego in London. And then also this transfer, does this happen? I mean, obviously she's got the stature for it, and obviously the playing ability, but I'm curious what the Emma Hayes connection, how she impacted the ending location for this transfer. I mean, obviously she has glowing things to say. She says, Naomi Girma is the best center back I've ever seen, and then Girma lands where her national team coach used to be. And so the addition of Emma Hayes, obviously it's reaped huge benefit in the 9-10 months or so she's been at the helm. But then she's getting her players in some spots that they may not have otherwise.
I mean, I think Naomi Girma would have generated attention and could have maybe gotten a big transfer or been a player with this kind of heat on her no matter what. I think there's a recognition she is a world-class defender. But yeah, I mean, look, if Chelsea, if there is sort of a race, or if there are teams that are like, oh, should we buy Naomi Girma? And Sandy was like, well, it's going to cost you $1 million. And your former successful head coach manager, who is now managing Naomi Girma at the national team level, you pick up the phone or you shoot her a text and you're like, Emma, is Naomi Girma worth $1 million? She's going to pay F yes. Believe, I don't know, we cursing on this show. Emma Hayes is the type of person that would say, absolutely, you pay $1 million for Naomi Girma, right? So, this, you think you're right that this helped. Again, Girma's reputation is big enough. She probably would have gotten some attention, but I don't know if it would have been $1 million, because Chelsea definitely has vouching for Naomi Girma with somebody they have a very strong connection with. So there is that.
I mean, curious to see how this all plays out. I'm curious to see when she'll go over there, if that'll be immediately, if there'll be some sort of delay on that. But I mean, we shall see. Naomi Girma, the first $1 million NWSL player. Pretty remarkable stuff. We'll see. One thing I do want to ask Jeff is, does the inflation of the expansion team and the inflation of the transfer fee, if those are linked in any way? So we'll have to come to that. Thank you for tuning in to our headlines here, long balls here on Morning Kickaround. If you haven't already, tell your friends, tell your family, and even create an account and tell your kids to subscribe to Morning Kickaround on YouTube channel. We have blasted past our 500 subscriber goal, so we are kicking on to 1,000 subscribers That's what we want to do moving forward. Help us become the town square, the water cooler spot, and the central hub for the American soccer conversation. You can follow along on social media at Kickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, or write us a little message, morningkickaround@gmail.com. Always love to get an email. We'll take our breath and come right back with today's big question here on Morning Kickaround. All right, the big question here for Wednesday, January 22nd. Has the MLS shed the retirement league label? To look at this question, we are happy to be joined by American soccer writer for The Athletic, Mr. Jeff Rueter. Welcome to Morning Kickaround, sir. How are you today?
Let's see if we can get him up. Oh, is he there? Okay, we do have him. All right. No.
I've been lurking in the background this whole time.
Okay,
well.
all
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Yeah, I didn't warn Jeff that we were a video show, Rob. This is still pretty new for people. Jeff and I go back, but he wasn't aware that I was going to put him on camera maybe. So shout out, though. Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff, yeah. We've never met in person. I'm Robert. I didn't know you looked like this. I mean, who would...
Yeah, it's a fresh haircut. You know, what can you do? So.
Yeah, looking sharp around the corners. Before we dig in on your piece about the question, the retirement league label, you referenced, some of these moves are real, and to kind of ignore the gonzo or the clickbaity sort of rumors or conversations. This year, what has been your favorite or most entertaining kind of clickbait transfer rumor for Major League Soccer this year?
Well, I mean, I don't think it gets much more, immediately failing the smell test than Neymar trying to match Lionel Messi's deal with the Chicago Fire of all teams. Like, look, I know that Xherdan Shaqiri was able to make bank, while doing the least over 2.5 years with the Chicago Fire. But the idea that a player who has played 900 minutes over the last 18 months and a player who honestly his stock, I think that just overall Neymar has such a polarizing pull. He is not Lionel Messi. He is not even Kevin De Bruyne, I would say. I think that there is sort of a faction of detractors around Neymar. I mean, both, just general soccer fans, but also fans of Brazil who look and say, look, he's padding his numbers. He's playing in an era when international teams are playing more games than ever. So, of course, he set the record. Of course, he is the all-time leading goal scorer, but he is not among the all-time greats because he was unable to bring back the World Cup. So,
wow.
I don't think that there is that same sort of move mountains to bring this guy in mentality that you would have with him. So I think that the idea that, it was being reported as not just that, they were looking into it, because we heard that with Sporting Kansas City and Cristiano Ronaldo 2 years ago, right? But the fact that they claimed to be in such an advanced stage that they were already talking about percentage cuts of, jersey sales and all that sort of stuff, that just was that was never going to materialize in that way.
Yeah, I definitely think that the thing about Neymar that's different than a Messi, obviously Messi's on a different level in terms of his career accomplishments, but it's clearly that Neymar, his reputation is of a fragile player. Right? I mean, it's not just injuries; it's sort of the way he plays. Whereas Lionel Messi has this reputation of he doesn't, he never dives. I don't know if that's exactly true, but he never dives, and he plays every possible game. He never wants to come off the field. And with Neymar, you're selling, at this point in his career, you'd be selling a player that is viewed as very fragile.
Yeah, and I think that he. Of the detractors of the sport in the broader sports landscape who talk about flopping, I think that the clip I see most often is Neymar actually at what would it have been, the 2018 World Cup, where he did kind of a triple barrel roll.
Yeah, that's a big time meme. None of those for Messi, right?
Yeah, exactly. And look, that sort of stuff does linger, and it does, unfortunately, for a market that's so confused about what a World Cup's importance is, that it asks Bastian Schweinsteiger if the Chicago Fire will win one. That's going to be their only lens into the sport. And so if part of a move like bringing in Messi, Neymar, I guess De Bruyne, maybe part of the move is to try to galvanize the general sports fan in the market to say, hey, you should show up because we have one of the best and you're an American sports fan and you expect the best from your American sports teams. it's a tougher sell if that's their only knowledge of a player like that.
Yeah, Jeff, I want to talk about your piece, which we do have the headline up on the screen. So everybody who has an athletic subscription, go check it out. If you don't, get an athletic subscription and support people like Jeff as he writes on American Soccer. MLS has shed its retirement league tag. Its recruitment is building for the future. What I think is really tough is that a lot of people, maybe people who are not MLS fans to begin with, or have
Sure.
a bias towards MLS, they see this as a binary, right? They see this as a zero-sum game. If you sign a Xherdan Shaqiri, you are a retirement league, no matter who else you're signing. But clearly, it's a lot more complicated than that, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, this gets into a little bit, like you said, everyone is going to consider signing a player of a certain age, right? Regardless of their veteran status. And I think that it's mostly just was necessary because, candidly, this was a piece kind of in response to my bosses in the UK, who were seeing some of the headlines come in and some of the players who were linked. And I think that there was a day where there was Neymar talks are advanced, Wilfred Zaha is the target, and just like a couple of other players who came in, and they're just like, okay, so are we back to like the 30-somethings club, after Lionel Messi? And I was like, no. And so I went right back in the lab, and I think within 2 hours churned this out. And look, like a lot of it is stuff that, like you said, if you've been following Major League Soccer, a lot of this you're just kind of nodding along like it's a favorite track from the 90s, right? Like there's a lot of this where it is, look, the designated player rule was necessary to be able to bring in that sort of pull, that sort of player of stature. You couldn't count on Hristo Stoichkov taking pay cuts time after time after time in order to bring in these Ballon d'Or caliber players, right? So you needed the designated player. And of course, the first players who are going to take that risk, that gamble, are going to be players on the other side of 30 who are needing to prolong their careers and see the marketability potential moving to the United States. That was at a time when Major League Soccer was desperate to stabilize, right? This is right after Toronto FC, RSL had launched, Chivas USA, right? And so there's this necessity to be able to bring in these players where you can guarantee fans will come to see 6 to 12 of your teams any given day, just to keep the cash flowing and keep the league going, right? And now we are so far past that. We aren't talking about existential crises on an annual basis. We're talking about squad building plans. We're talking about academy structures. We're talking about sell-on percentages. We're talking about competing in international youth tournaments with the biggest clubs in Europe, right? And I think that there's just kind of a failure to recognize that, especially when every January, specifically in January, because I think that, look, obviously MLS's calendar is flipped from the European standard. So this is the point of the European year when clubs are desperate to offload bloated contracts for aging players so that they can recruit and bring in reinforcements of a younger age, right? And so when you see let's say Wilfred Zaha was with Crystal Palace right now, right? I know that he moved to Lyon and was on loan with Galatasaray before he moved to Charlotte FC, but let's say he was with Crystal Palace. And let's say that he was rotational or a bench figure, given all the young players that have signed since dating back to Patrick Vieira's time with Crystal Palace. If they were really desperate to offload him and Charlotte FC came in, then that's the banter move of the year, right? Because it's, okay, Wilf Zaha was our top earner. He was only playing about 400 minutes, and now he's off to MLS, Classic Retirement League. But it's just a failure to recognize like the broader evolution of MLS as a sporting circuit. It's changing role in the global transfer market. I would say since Alphonso Davies and Miguel Almiron moved in the same winter. And it's just like, like you said, it's not a binary. You need to find that gray area. And so this is basically spelling out that gray area for people who don't follow MLS as closely as, regular listeners of this show might.
Well, I'm going to say this, and you don't have to comment, Jeff. I read the piece, and it definitely felt like it was aimed at a non-American audience with the tone of the piece. And I will leave it there because I don't want to get you in trouble with your bosses. But look, you mentioned Coach Hernandez and Ricky Puig. Those are the two players on the screen in the image that's attached to the story. And Harry in the chat has commented. He said the problem is star European players are older. MLS is not a retirement league, but until they can get star players from Europe in their prime. I mean, this is the thing, right? Like,
they are.
This is there are some cases of that, and obviously we should talk about that. But, what I think Harry is saying is sort of like the players who could be starting for Champions League level clubs in the top 5 leagues are not choosing MLS at 23 and 24, which, is that's a kind of a ridiculous ask at this point in the league's history. And it's a really big question as to whether or not the league will ever get to a place to truly be able to attract players who could start for those kinds of clubs, not just because of money, but because of prestige. Like, is there ever a world in which we can imagine MLS having the same kind of prestige as the Premier League? That's a really tough ask.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's an apples to apples comparison because of the strength of UEFA, right? Like that's just kind of that's not acknowledging the fact that FIFA's support of the confederations was not balanced and was not fair and was not concentrated equally until very recently under the current president, I would argue. And I think that when you look at the UEFA Champions League, there's no other competition that competes with that. Major League Soccer is regularly signing players who start and win finals in the Copa Libertadores, but we don't necessarily hear about, is Major League Soccer ever going to be as big as Brazil or Argentina, right? And I think that the amount of money that is in this sport at the highest levels, and when we talk about the highest levels, yeah, we're talking about the Champions League. It's very, very difficult to contend with that. So I don't even think it's really look, I mean, you remember a decade ago, Don Garber was saying all these things about we need to be a league of choice and we need to be a top 10 league and a top 8 league. And it kind of shifted with every state of the league press conference. But the reality of it is, unless or until there is a major change, and the major change I'm thinking of is the Super League, that hierarchy is just set in stone. I don't think that it's kind of a one. If you make one competition, it's a guarantee. Like, I don't think anyone's looking and saying Denmark or Belgium is a level that MLS can never aspire to reach. I think many would actually argue that they're already there on the standard of competition and balance in particular. But yeah, if you're just trying to look and say, if it's not as good as the Premier League, I'm not going to watch it. Well, then there's hundreds of soccer leagues in the world you shouldn't even bother with. Because there is only one Premier League, and it just kind of defeats the purpose. Again, this goes back to that American mentality of you are used to seeing the best American football league is in America, the best baseball league is here, the best hockey league, the best basketball league, but just America was late. America was decades and decades late to the party, as has been very well chronicled over the past couple of decades. And this is the reality of it. Like, I don't know. I think that I've also found, I will just say in closing, I think I found that most soccer fans have room in their hearts for at least 2 clubs. So I think that there's still a way to get that Premier League itch, even if you are, supporting and grappling with the reality that Major League Soccer is not as good as England's Premier League.
In your piece here, you document all the different ways that Major League Soccer has introduced different mechanisms of ways to get players that aren't just the DP. Just last week, MLS introduced the cash trades scheme, but the part that surprised me the most was the immediate introduction in the middle of January. So, has there been any reasoning given why they did it with immediacy, and almost makes me think, like, who does that benefit most in the short term to introduce that now in the middle of the off season?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the real benefit is for clubs that are trying to plan out both transfer windows, because usually a sporting director isn't just looking at the immediate window, they're also thinking about the next one and realistically the one after that as well. And if you are starting to field bids for a player, I'm just going to pick on, I'm trying to think of a guy who just left Major League Soccer recently. But, if you're going to sign Miguel Almiron, let's say that he's getting the offers in 2018 and you're only getting like $5 million offers from abroad. Okay, well, that's not necessarily what you brought him in from Lanús for. So what are you going to go ahead and try to barter with? MLS teams here, okay, well, he's ready for a move. He wants to get out of Atlanta and he wants a market. Okay, well, what are you going to give him? $500,000 of allocation money? That's not as good as a $5 million transfer fee, even if it's below market value. So I would say that while the January window is open for Europe, it makes a lot of sense that MLS teams should have the ability to bid against those clubs if there is a player that they see as ideal. And I think that there are a couple of obvious ones that my friend Tom Bogert has reported. Evander of Portland, Luciano Acosta of Cincinnati. If they're disgruntled now, it makes sense to not risk losing them at cut rate deals to Liga MX or in Argentina, most likely, I would guess. it makes sense to try to keep those players in. And I think that ultimately, yes, there are some owners that have been very reticent to evolve this league as a sporting circuit and have to invest more money. But I think the majority of them are desperate to be able to do more with their clubs and to shape this more in their image rather than these fixed roster constraints. So I think that the timing makes sense just to keep an entire year of continuity. I agree with you. These changes probably should have come in November, just so that as teams approach January, they know the market that they'll be operating in. But realistically, boards of directors and the chief soccer officers should have been aware this would have been coming down the pike even a month ago.
All right, so lots there, and again, go read Jeff's piece on the retirement league label and whether MLS has shed it and the recruitment of the future. I also want to bring up Naomi Girma, because you wrote a little bit of a profile on Naomi at The Athletic as well, Jeff. And we said last week when the rumors were percolating of $1 million transfer that she was the best defender in the world. I had at least one comment on the channel. It said, no, not so fast. There's actually a Spanish defender who is better, Mapi Leon. But I think Emma Hayes agrees with us. What is your feeling about this move for Naomi Girma?
Yeah, and I jumped in, as you were discussing kind of the tail end of the last segment with would Emma Hayes have played a role there. And I think that with one thing that's difficult is when you have a milestone as big as like the first $1 million player, you kind of need to make sure that the player you're spending on is good for it, because there's going to be, relative to most transfers, a little bit more pageantry and circus around this sort of signing. There's going to need to be a level head and the ability to handle that sort of pressure. And I think that time and again, Naomi Girma has proven that she is beyond her years in handling that pressure, whether we're talking about being a top performer at the 2023 World Cup when the U.S. was at its worst in program history, whether we're talking about debuting and winning Defender of the Year as a rookie and then following it up by leading the Supporter Shield, winning San Diego Wave, with another Defender of the Year trophy, right? If we're talking about the 2024 Olympics and in a tournament that was so often, headlined by the attacking talent, putting in probably the best performance of any player at the tournament in the semifinal against Germany, which was such a dominant performance that I just zeroed in on that in this profile, right? Like it's just, there's a certain standard that you need to hit if you're going to be able to be a record setter like this, but you also certainly need to be able to have the mental wherewithal. And I think that Naomi Girma certainly has that. And I think it just makes a lot of sense when you look at her age, when you look at the lack of mileage on her legs, just given the nuances of the American college system and not having played as much as a 27, 28-year-old defender may have with her reputation and pedigree, the marketability of being a U.S. women's national team player. I think it just checks a ton of boxes here for Chelsea.
Exciting times here for American players and the American game. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing a bit about the stories you've written. Can you tell our viewers where to find more of your stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a senior writer at The Athletic, so everything I do is going to be over there. And there you go. And otherwise, follow me on Blue Sky. I'm pretty much off Twitter these days, so I'm at Jeff Rueter on Blue Sky.
There you go. That's the tip.
All right. Thank you, Jeff, so much for joining us here on Morning Kickaround. Thank you, viewer. If you haven't already done so, click the subscribe button, Morning Kickaround, and help us keep on driving towards that 1,000 subscriber goal. We're going to take a breath here for a second, recover, let our brains scintillate and marinate on what we just heard from Jeff. Come right back with today's Culture Wars here on Morning Kickaround. Oh, that is Culture Wars, the remix here on Wednesday.
I'm not sure what's happening there. Yeah, that might not be a good version of the Culture Wars intro, or something's going on with StreamYard. So that's okay. It's a live show.
DJ producer Jenny dropping the stutter version of Culture Wars, but either way, Wednesday, January 22nd. We saw something significant in the world of Major League Soccer coverage. Long-running and kind of a flagship show for Major League Soccer coverage came to an end this week. MLS Killed Off Extra Time podcast. What are they doing, Jason?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I'd seen rumors of this. I think people had picked up on some hints that Matt Doyle was dropping on his social media that it was coming to an end. And then yesterday, Andrew Wiebe with this message hell of a run. Everything good comes to an end. Extra Time deserved a goodbye after 15 years. And they posted a final pod. And, there's been some changes over the years. Like, let me just kind of I don't want to make it about me, but I got to kind of describe my perspective.
Come on, Jason, we
this.
do. We want to make it about you. Come on.
No, I want to give my perspective because I do think there aren't a lot of people who have my particular perspective because I've been in American soccer media for a long time. Now, I started out as an amateur, right? I started out DIY, doing my own thing, writing a blog, doing a podcast off of that blog. It turned eventually into the Best Soccer Show, which some people know me for. And as MLS was growing, Beckham arrived, things like the Best Soccer Show kind of were born. There was this question of where do you get coverage of what is a second-tier professional sports league in America, right? In a country that cares mostly about the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, how do you get coverage? And, there were a lot of independent creators then. It was kind of a glory time for blogs. It was a great moment, a golden age for blogs in 2009, 10, 11, 12. And Major League Soccer around that time decided, hey, we there's not enough coverage of the league. We're going to create our own editorial team, and we're going to cover the league at the league website. And this caused an uproar of sorts among blogger types when I was on what was then Twitter back in 2012, whatever that was, right? It was or 2000. I guess the podcast is 2009 if it's 15 years old, right? That seems crazy to me. But around that time, as that stuff was happening, there was this whole big question of whether you could cover yourself. Like, is this a little bit too Pravda? Like, is this a little bit too state media, right? Major League Soccer covering itself. And yet I think time has proven that it was a smart decision because there was a lack of coverage. Now, I don't love some of the knock-on effect it had, right? It kind of became this thing where if you weren't the league website, you didn't get a lot of consideration. Individual teams might work with bloggers and independent writers, but it was really tough sometimes. Podcasts, you kind of always felt like you were being held back from growing your own independent podcast covering a league you cared about because the league itself was kind of eating up all of the oxygen in the room. I think that was a fair thing. My relationship with Extra Time has always been complicated. Like, I'm not going to lie about that. And I'll lay down on the couch for a second and again, make it about me. But when the Best Soccer Show really got going, we had a good listenership. And around 2013, we went to Columbus for a USA-Mexico qualifier. If you remember, this is the one where Clint Dempsey missed the penalty on purpose to keep it 2-0. You remember this one, Robert? Maybe some people out there do. They remember that Clint Dempsey had a penalty kick to make it 3-0, and he missed it on purpose to keep it 2-0. Landon Donovan scored, I think, his final U.S. men's national team goal in that game. But we went as an independent. Yeah, we went as an independent podcast to cover American soccer, right, and to engage. And actually, I think at the time we were maybe part of Kick TV's family. So if you remember Kick TV, it was that. And we ran into Andrew Wiebe, Jared Dubois, and I. My Best Soccer Show partner. By the way, Best Soccer Show still exists. We're a little bit choppy because of Jared's schedule, but it still exists. Go find it on podcasts and on YouTube. And Wiebe, who maybe had a couple of American Outlaw provided adult beverages, said, "Hey, we think of you guys as our competition, or like, it's Extra Time Radio and the Best Soccer Show." And we were we had signed a deal with Kick, but we weren't making great money. It wasn't like we were some massive organization and backed by a big corporation. It was kind of just like still very indie. And it was like, wow, Andrew Wiebe, who works for Major League Soccer, whose podcast is backed by Major League Soccer and is on their league website, thinks of us as competition. And it was cool because we didn't, we were just doing our own thing. We didn't have anybody telling us we're going to promote you or do whatever. We had no promotion.
Yeah.
And I always appreciated Wiebe for that. But at the same time, like, I was in podcasting, I was in radio, I was talking about Major League Soccer, and I never wanted Andrew Wiebe or Matt Doyle or David Gass or even before that, Nick Furchow and Simon Borg and Greg Lawless. I didn't want their takes coming out of my mouth. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't want to listen to their show, absorb their information, and then regurgitate what they said. Even if, sometimes I might take something in and then credit the person I heard it from. I try to do that as much as possible. But in this case, I never wanted it to be like that. I always wanted it to be organic from me because I was a close watcher of the league, and so I never engaged with Extra Time Radio as a direct listener. But I know it matters, right? And you just look at the tweets and the posts. This is from Blue Sky, James Knowlton, who writes on American Soccer. He said that it felt independent to him. Some people might not think that, but it felt independent to him. It was accessible, widely available, even from an Apple TV point of view. And this is the change, right, Rob? That the Apple TV has stepped in, and now all the media stuff for MLS is all mixed up in the Apple TV deal. Yep. If you want subscribers for something that shows all MLS games who are coming to the league for something other than Messi and more likely to stay post-Messi, and you want to keep them post-Messi, you want retention, Extra Time is surely the kind of in-depth, accessible show that attracts people and keeps them interested. Yeah. So what are they doing, right? Like, I don't have to have engaged with Extra Time Radio as a listener to understand that it had an important and crucial place in a lot of the routines and consumption of Major League Soccer for fans. And there are other podcasts. But I will say that because there are so few American soccer jobs still in 2025, so few full-time American soccer jobs, it's really hard to know if you're ever going to find a show that will be as well-informed as Extra Time Radio, because those guys were literally paid to watch and write about the league. And now it's off the table. Now it's gone. And nobody really understands why.
Yeah, from my perspective, I was an occasional listener. This was Extra Time Radio was the show that I first dipped into it in that sort of era when the show was new. And then whenever I needed something specific, very granular, something that's like so deep in MLS that I needed to find it, that was the place to go. I wasn't by any means a regular listener, but I knew that if there was something very, very, very specific that was only MLS centric, that was the hub for it. And that was a really good point in that tweet that you brought up of there's not many outlets or productions that will have that tenure. Just like in American soccer, teams come and go, leagues come and go. There's very few unadulterated, unfractured relationships in soccer in the United States. And so if one of the main flagship shows, or the flagship show for a long time, goes away in the midst of this messy era, I think that's a very valid point to say, like, when Messi goes away, what will keep those people going that were here before, that they're tied to the league, was this show. And I think there are some people that this was their exclusive home for Major League Soccer coverage. And where do they go now that they're gone? Like, are all of these different creators going to fracture off? And will it, come back? Will there be something of that ilk and something that granular? And like you said, informed beyond the Apple and Messi era.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, like, and I'm not a media critic, right? But I do, obviously I'm an American soccer person, and all of this is, like, we do not have the luxury as American soccer fans to just care about the actual game that happens on the field. No, we got to talk real estate, media deals, all that sort of stuff. We got to be watching city council meetings for, to green light stadium plans. It's been a while since we've done that, but that's still a thing, right? It's coming. Yeah, we're always talking about stuff that is off the field or related to the growth of the game. And that's the thing. We are all boosters of American soccer when we become fans of this game and this league, right? And it could be USL that you're a fan of, but you're still a booster, right? I guess there probably are some less connected, more casual, or simply put, just fans of the team that exist. And I am keenly aware that not everybody's posting all the time, right? Not everybody's on social media sharing their thoughts. And what I see is only a fraction of the true perspective of fans. But I definitely think a lot of people who engage with American soccer become boosters. And we start thinking, well, that's how I got my start. My blog was based on this idea of how do we win a World Cup on the men's side? Well, we got to do this, and that, and the other thing, and I got to check it. It's culture that matters. It's development that matters. It's academies that matter. It's, how do we, does the league need to be one of the best in the world for us to win a World Cup? Okay, well, how do we get our league to that point, right? So we all become boosters. So when we see something like this happen, and again, I think you can obviously say, you can make an argument that Major League Soccer covering itself was always awkward and weird, and it didn't really have the true spirit of independent coverage that we want. But in absence of that, what was MLS to do? And I certainly respect the guys who put their blood, sweat, and tears into the product, and that's Matt Doyle and Andrew Wiebe and David Gass and Kalen Carr and, name the whole crew of people over there. Like, I respect the effort they put in, and they truly do care about this league. It's not just a job for them. Right? They are boosters as well. They work for the league, but they are boosters as well, and they care. And now you've taken that away. And I will also add to this, Rob. Was there ever an official Spanish language podcast from Major League Soccer? Now, I'm only learning Spanish as an adult. I'm pretty sure you don't habla español, so maybe we're just not aware. Maybe it's not in our narrow view of the league. But that's another thing. Like, if you were talking about how do you maximize the reach of the league, how do you make new fans, why aren't you engaging directly with millions and millions and millions of people who come from cultures or who have family who come from cultures who care desperately about the sport and would happily engage with Spanish language content? So this is all wrapped up in that, right? Like, what is happening right now? What is Apple doing? And why are they doing it? We are all confused.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens with this. Will there be an extra time radio kind of replacement on Apple platforms, or will these individual creators, like you said, the Weebies and Gasses and others, will they move on and provide independent what do you call it? Production or content creation on their own and their own channels, and maybe that'll add some richness to the coverage. And a good point that Urias put out there is being a self-covering show, they wouldn't touch things like Save the Crew, which are often the most interesting ones that kind of create a little bit of friction and outside of the corporate talking points.
And yes, and look, and people who know me know that was a central part of the United States of Soccer when I was doing the radio show. I talked about Save the Crew every single day it was going on. We covered that story, and I'm glad we were there. And I was obviously working in a corporate environment at SiriusXM and was able to do that. And we do need more of that. And I would encourage MLS, if you're going to take away ETR and that outlet for people, well, then engage more and be directly engaged with all of the outlets that might want to cover you, whether they are SiriusXM and big and a rights holder because games are broadcast on SiriusXM, or if they're smaller outfits. And this is an opportunity, and credit to Matt Doyle, who's been very out front with this. This is an opportunity to remind people that there are independent outlets covering especially specific teams. Sounder at Heart, a new one just launched in Nashville with Ben Wright and that group, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it's called because it is new and it's not sticking on my head. So if anybody in the chat remembers what was announced for 615soccer.com. So that's the one that is covering Nashville. You have the one up in Boston, in New England, who's also Bet Musket. But Bet Musket is a great one. They've been around for a long time. Bayou City Soccer down in Houston. Seeing Red out of New York, or covering the New York Red Bulls, of course. New York, New Jersey. There are massive. I'm trying to remember if the crew. There's like a couple different crew ones. Last time I checked, but again, we're not going to be comprehensive with a list. But this is an opportunity to remind people that there are independent outlets. The fracturing of media, it's not just soccer. Everything is moving in this direction, and it is tough. And if you want good coverage, especially of your local team, go support independent coverage. And support us. I mean, we're going to talk MLS on this show. Support us.
Yeah, I was going to say, MLS is in a weird position in my soccer relationships because I'm a huge American soccer supporter and world soccer supporter, but not necessarily, where I spend my time doesn't have a Major League Soccer team. So it's kind of a fractured relationship there too. And what will Major League Soccer do to bring in people that aren't in a market, so to speak? And
Rob just outed himself as a Euro snob, everybody. I just want to point that out. That just happened.
Well, that's not true because
Just-
I support.
just
I
messing with you.
literally support and work for the
know.
team that is in
know.
the park down the street from my house. So, like I said, an American soccer fan and journalist. I don't know if that's the right word, but a coverer of American soccer. But at the same time, Major League Soccer is not right there in the middle of my Venn diagram. I want it to be, and we shall see as we move into a full this will be the first time, when the season rolls around in about a month or two. It'll be, the first time we'll be kicking off the season together, covering Major League Soccer together, Jason. So you will be kind of my Sherpa up the mountain of a Major League Soccer season. I covered Chicago singularly a number of years ago, but we shall see, if this all grows on me and how we can spread the word, so to speak, or at least shed light on Major League Soccer for our viewers. And if you want to assist us in becoming the town square for the American soccer conversation, and kind of jump on board and see if Major League Soccer kind of warms in our heart, or see what the MLS hater in me will provide to the American soccer conversation. Subscribe right now, Morning Kickaround. Help us get to 1,000 subscribers. Before we go, we got to touch on Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi has done it again. He's done it again. He has stirred up the hornet's nest that is the Mexican soccer fandom with just a small gesture after Inter Miami played an exhibition with Club America, and eventually, there it is. Just that hand gesture has riled up Club America and the Mexican fan base. And I got to say, I had a bit of a question when Javier Mascherano, good buddies with Messi, countryman, not a lot of coaching experience. He gave a reply. He's nonplussed, didn't give him much attention. Does this show that Mascherano is going to let Leo Messi do whatever he wants now that Mascherano's the coach?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, Lionel Messi's going to do what he wants because he's Lionel Messi. It has nothing to do with Javier Mascherano. I mean, that gesture.
He won't put the reins on him. Obviously, if he's going to incite the crowd.
He's inciting the crowd? Is that inciting the crowd? I mean, if you can be incited by that, how sensitive are you? Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm missing something about the context, and I'm sorry that I did not watch Inter Miami versus Club America. Where did they play that game? In Vegas?
Yeah.
They had penalty kicks? Like, I'm sorry I didn't watch that. I'm sorry. Am I a bad soccer fan because I didn't watch a friendly between Miami and Club America? I don't know.
Who's saying that?
It's pretty ridiculous that anybody would be upset by that particular. And look, I mean, what this is always what happens. Somebody says something mean on the internet, or somebody takes a shot, or somebody is like rude. Like the way that my parents would say, hey, be polite, and they act in a non-polite way, and then people are always in the comments going, but it's true. It's true, though. That's true, though. Like, as if saying something true means you should get away with being an asshole, right? And I don't know if Lionel Messi was being un pendejo, right? I don't know if he was being quite that bad. Although, again, Mexican fans apparently are upset about it. And Bofo Bautista, former Mexican international, went on Instagram, posted an image from the World Cup in which he knocked Lionel Messi off the ball. So there's this split image of Bofo Bautista and Messi, when Messi had the long hair and he was a young player, kind of colliding with Bofo Bautista, and then Bautista with the ball at his feet and Messi in a heap behind him, as if to say, look, I roasted you in the World Cup. I took you down. And then he has some text. It's in Spanish, but he says, I admired you as a player, but if you're going to talk about my country, then you need to talk about them with professionalism and education, is what he said. Now, last time I checked, Mexico has 0 World Cup titles. 0. They have 0. And Argentina has 3. So I don't know. Bofo, what are you doing, man? Why are you so bothered by this? I don't get it.
how I imagine this playing out. He, Mexican fans, especially in the United States, they're not shy about their disdain when the opponent has some success. So maybe they were chirping him quite a bit. So he felt compelled to remind them that he has done very well in comparison to Mexico World Cups, and Argentina has defeated Mexico on that stage a number of times. So I guess it is what it is. You poke the bear, sometimes you get a reaction.
I will say, Lionel
One
Messi underrated as a trash talker, underrated as somebody who will give it as good as he gets it, right? And obviously,
that's what I'm saying. He totally got chirped. I mean, look at the shirt off showing the Real Madrid is basically the kind of reaction he showed there, right? Is that you're gonna do all that, you're gonna chirp me and say all sorts of probably terrible things to me, and then I'm good enough at my job to be able to just, say, look what I just did to you, and just move on from there. But we've had a bumper episode. We missed Monday, so we went extra long today. One more thing. What's your shirt say, Jason? I didn't shirt check you at the beginning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no jersey today because it's 12 degrees outside, and I just felt like a jersey was not the proper. I'm inside my house, and it's fairly warm, but man, you can't crank it up to 75. So I grabbed the Live Breathe Football crew that I had in my closet. Shout out to Boone and the team at Live Breathe Football, who still are doing incredible stuff. If you don't know about Live Breathe Football, check them out. They make really cool gear, and they do partnerships with clubs sometimes and make really cool stuff. So there you go.
Very cool, very cool, very cool. I think our morning's been kicked. We've got I think today's the longest episode of Morning Kickaround, so be sure to check out the segment on the Morning Kickaround YouTube channel. And until Friday, everybody, please enjoy your soccer.